Budget battle. 37 days now until state lawmakers need a budget in place to avoid a shutdown. So what's the holdup? Back to school. A conversation with superintendents reveals some pointed criticism of said legislators, with several free school programs now hanging in the balance. The discussion starts right now on an August 24th edition of Flashpoint. Happy Sunday, everybody. I'm Jason Colthorpe. You know, a news writing mentor of mine used to say, don't use the words still or continue in the lead because, well, it tells you, the viewer, there's nothing new. So you'll have to pardon me when I say still no state budget as lawmakers continue to be at loggerheads over key issues. You know, I think I was also told not to use words like loggerheads, but anywho. The Speaker of the House, Matt Hall, has emerged with a new tactic on the state budget, and that's to deal directly with Governor Gretchen Whitmer. The governor wants any budget to include a plan to fix the roads. And while they both want to spend around $3 billion on their plans for the roads, they're at odds over to where to find that money. There's also the school aid budget that remains in limbo. All kids go back to school by next week, and districts still don't know exactly how much they have to set their budgets. That's why the state passed a law to force itself to have a state budget in place by July 1st. So schools would know how many teachers they can have on staff, if they'll be able to offer free lunches all year, and so on. So we're going to hear from the state superintendent on that a little later, and some other prominent superintendents who sat down with Nick Monticelli this week to discuss some of those back-to-school topics. We're going to discuss it with our 4 insiders as well, along with the other things that are in the news this week, and there are some good ones, like the future of mail-in voting right here in Michigan. Let's get rolling right now on Flashpoint. All right, joining me at the table this morning, Dennis Cowan, former mayor of Royal Oak. Do not blame him for the parking changes. Nancy Kaffer provides the acerbic wit as the editorial page editor for the Detroit Free Press. Andrea Bitely, the founder of Bitely Communications and the former comms director for Attorney General Bill Schuette. And Stephen Henderson, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, is the executive advisor at Bridge Detroit. Good morning, everybody. Issue 1, the state budget. Is Michigan headed for a shutdown? I'll start over here, Dennis, with you.
Well, I wouldn't recommend a shutdown. Nobody does well.
But are we headed for one?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, I have heard through my sources that the governor and the heads of the 2 chambers are supposed to sit down before she leaves for Japan.
Early next week.
Early next week, so there'll be some movement there with people talking. And I also understand that the Republicans internally are talking about starting to get out some numbers in the next week. So begin that process.
Nancy, it seems like that's, I would call it pie in the sky thinking, just listening to Matt Hall yesterday, insult pretty much everybody who's going to be involved while also kind of complimenting the governor. But when he said 2 weeks, I thought, wow, that's going to be tough.
Yeah, 2 weeks seems like a stretch, but I do think the prospect of a shutdown is a powerful incentive. People are willing to race right up to the edge. They're very rarely are they willing to go off of it. So I think that, you know, it does seem like with this specter looming, we haven't had this in years. I think people will eventually get motivated.
Andrea, is it just a matter of how the speaker says, just get everybody in the room, even as he said, if he has to drag Winnie Brinks into the room, if the governor has to do that.
If they dragged Andrea into the room, it would all get sorted out a lot faster.
It would be done tomorrow. I think it is a matter of getting them all in one room. I think they do need to have these conversations. There's been reporting that they haven't been together since, I believe, July, which is an incredibly long time when we're right now nearing September and still don't have a budget. I've done overnights in the Capitol in the old days, and I worked for one of the caucuses, and let me tell you, those benches, not comfortable. So you're going to have some folks that are getting pretty near to the edge of their ability to do their jobs if we have overnight sessions for a week.
The roads plan seems to be key to all this, Stephen. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the governor wants to get that into better shape than it has been before she's done, and Republicans have an incentive to stand in her way. I mean, I think getting ready for next year, they want to show that, look, we want to keep government smaller, we want to keep more money in people's pockets, and bump around on the roads if you want, or find the money elsewhere. I think that is the key, though, to getting this done.
Does anybody think the governor isn't doing enough, or doing just what she should be in this process, or should be getting her hands dirty, so to speak?
I mean, as long as it's not done, I think you can argue that no one's doing enough. I mean, because if they were, they would be meeting, like Andrea said, if it's correct that they haven't met since July, that's sort of shocking. Like, we would like to think that they're up there diligently trying to make progress on this. There should be reasonable concerns that each side has that they can discuss, address, and find a compromise on. We know that's not typically how things have been working, but yeah, I mean, again, as long as it's not done, I think, yes, clearly they're not doing enough.
Andrew, you've been behind some of these closed-door meetings. When you throw around the insults a few days prior, what is it like getting back in the room? Does that make it tougher to hammer these things out?
It does make it tougher. When you're throwing insults, you're throwing lawsuits, you're throwing all of the different pieces that we've got floating around in Lansing right now. You're just not going to have the most amicable discussion. And insults adding layer on layer on that. And it's not just the leadership. You have individual members of the House and the Senate that are also out making TikTok videos and Instagram videos where they're insulting each other and the leadership of the other caucus. You have just a political tornado going on in Lansing right now, but the tornado isn't really doing much.
Do you know who a shutdown would be amazing for? Mike Duggan, because he could say, look, I'm an independent, Lansing isn't working, so maybe that would motivate the various members of the parties, because I think that gives him a significant advantage in his independent campaign for governor to differentiate himself if there's a shutdown.
It's like you looked at my rundown. We were going to mention Matt Hall couldn't help but talk about Mike Duggan at least 3 different times, Dennis, I heard during that press conference. They're very complimentary of each other. Why is that happening?
Well, a lot of this has to do with the whole strategy of trying to get the budget done and get your priorities accomplished. So I think however that gets done, I mean, they always say you shouldn't see the making of sausage in the making of laws, and that's what we're seeing right now. I do think, though, the governor really has to step up to the plate. I was disappointed back in, the end of the term when the House meltdown happened, and really she was nowhere to be found. And she's got to get involved in this process if she wants her signature legacy road bill to get passed.
Stephen, when you look at the way Mike Duggan is now sort of intertwined, it seems like she mentioned fortuitous for his campaign. Yeah. It just stays in the headlines no matter where he is.
Yeah, no, he's doing a good job of playing the role, right? I'll talk to anybody. I'll make a deal with anybody. I'm not going to insult anybody. And what's wrong with government is the fact that everybody else is dug in on this sort of party politics. It's certainly working in a fundraising sense, and it's getting the party's attention in that way. I think we have not seen whether voters are going to take to that or not.
And an interesting article from the Detroit News yesterday saying anybody who endorses Mike Duggan, Democrats, any other Democrats that endorse him, is cut off from the DNC data, or I shouldn't say DNC, but the state Democratic database. Does that hurt him at all?
Well, quoted in that story was Mr. Mark Bernstein saying that it doesn't matter because that database isn't very good anyway, and they didn't know if he even had access to it. So potentially pushing people around using information and data and support, it just, again, plays into what Mike Duggan is saying. Like, they're playing politics with the future of our state. So it's all coming back around to the independent campaign looking like an advantage at this moment.
Do you agree with that, Nancy, that Democrats are going to be worried that they lose access to, I guess, the lists within the party?
So I'm just someone who watches campaigns from the outside, so I can't really tell you how useful those tools are. But I mean, yeah, if Andrea says no, then I'm going with no. No, I mean, I think that this is about maybe kind of trying to define a line. Clearly, members of the heads of the parties are very worried about this independent candidacy, and they're trying to stiffen up their members. They're trying to draw some real lines about what does it mean to say that you're a Democrat or a Republican or independent, and it does mean something. It's not a restaurant anyone can stop in. It's a club, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and if you're not a member, you're not a member. If you are a member, you are. So but how useful are these tools? Again, I defer to wiser folks like this lady here.
Dennis, would you almost feel like it feels like Democrats are afraid of Mike Duggan?
Well, I would be if I were in the Democratic Party, and I think the one thing that'll be fascinating is, will they threaten donors? Because that could be a bridge too far and could push people over to Mike Duggan. So everybody's doing a kabuki dance right now because of this interesting
How does the
phenomena.
kabuki go again? Yeah.
It goes in strange places. I think the amazing thing is that we're going to have, you could win with less than 40%. I think one thing for the Republicans, and it's our turn, because since Milliken, every 8 years, except for the 12 with Engler, it's flipped. So it is our turn. If we earn it, we've got a very strong field, much stronger than 4 years ago.
All right, Mike Duggan also interjected himself into a different race this week. Pretty big. We're going to get the takes on that coming up next. Back here on Flashpoint, and earlier this week, Mayor Mike Duggan finally put his thumb on the scale of the current race, Stephen Henderson, by endorsing Mary Sheffield. Is this race over?
Well, I mean, the race seemed like it was over on primary day, right, when she won more than 50% of the vote and has something like a 30-point lead over the second place finisher. I think that's the framing for the race. I'm not sure how much it matters that Duggan is supporting Sheffield. I mean, Detroiters have kind of I think moved on from the idea of Mike Duggan because he's not going to be the mayor and he's going to run for governor. They elected him 3 times. They certainly support him. I think if this were a closer race, we would be paying more attention to what Duggan was saying. But in this case, I guess I don't know what to make of it.
Isn't it a legacy issue, though? The same with the governor and then the mayor. They both have this legacy issue that they're battling. With the governor, it's fixing the damn roads. She's got to get that done. And for Mayor Duggan, it's who is going to preserve his legacy the best.
Yeah,
Who's
I
going to
think
preserve
that's
the
what he's
positive.
thinking.
And particularly who's going to maintain his legacy
Right.
while he's running for governor
Right.
and trying to convince voters in this part of the state that Detroit is not a worrisome brand. So.
Dennis, you're a former mayor. How much does this factor in, do you think, in your perspective?
I agree with Steve. I mean, the fact that he's been elected 3 times, I think will have some influence on it. But it's a tough battle for the challenger. They've got a real road to hoe, and I think it's going to be very difficult. The interesting thing is, it's one thing to endorse, it's the other thing, will you help me raise money? We'll have to see how that plays out.
I don't know that she even needs the money. I mean, she's so far out ahead in every metric at this point. It's hard to see a path for someone to challenge.
This is really, I got out of the prediction game in 2016, but all the pieces here are, it would be
What happened that year?
strongly pointing in a direction. And this Duggan endorsement, he's extremely popular with the 20% of voting age Detroiters who vote. But in this Richard Schubach and Glariff Group survey back in May, while Mayor Duggan is overwhelmingly popular, almost half of Detroiters said they thought that the city should need to go in a different direction. So if Mary Sheffield can harness both of those things. The Duggan endorsement is really just gilding the lily because she already had a lot of money, a commanding lead. And if she can kind of harness this, I'm the person who can continue what's been going on and also take Detroit in a new direction. I think she's got a really solid message. Well, she clearly has a solid message.
You really are looking at my rundown because Trump earlier this week threatened mail-in ballot voting. Now, Jocelyn Benson sounded off on this, saying, didn't stop short of saying it's illegal, or she stopped a little short of saying that, but said it's legally murky, if you will. Can he do this? Dennis, where do you see this? She also said that Michiganders love mail-in voting and it's completely safe.
Well, I think you'd have to have a change of federal law governing the federal elections, which in essence governs the state elections. Interestingly, I've talked to a couple clerks this week, and both of them said if they could eliminate one thing, it would be the expanded mail-in voting. That with the early voting, which is for 9 days, is a lot of activity, a lot of cost. And if they could go back to the old way, they'd like that, but still keep the early voting, which gives everybody that opportunity.
Stephen, of course, we bury the lead here. He gets all of this motivation from Vladimir Putin, which isn't it kind of like Bernie Madoff saying, I can fix your 401k?
Right, not the guy you want advice from. I think this is an interesting fight to fight for a Republican. I mean, Republicans do well with this mail-in voting. Also, if you're in the military and you're overseas, that's how you vote too, and you probably are voting for a Republican in that case. So I guess I'm not sure what he's after him, and it's more of the idea that, hey, our elections are somehow compromised or susceptible to fraud. But here it does not seem to fit with some of the other things that he's been critical And if this happened, his own party would pay a pretty big price.
Andrea, I always get confused on this too, because when he says elections were fixed, he won 2 of them.
Right.
And the second one they lost was extremely close. Or I guess that one wasn't close, but it came after a very tumultuous first. And why wouldn't have other Republicans lost along the way? But
Right.
you feel like mail-in voting is something that we're going to see change because of this?
I think one part of this that I found very interesting was calling it mail-in voting as opposed to absentee voting. So many of us for so long have heard the words absentee voting. You are a retiree, a snowbird who lives in Michigan most of their life and then spends a couple months down in Florida. You think of an absentee ballot. You don't think of it as mail-in voting. You think of it as an absentee ballot. So the language that he chose is very interesting to me because it sounds a little more nefarious when you say mail-in voting than absentee voting. People aren't used to those words. And yes, more Republicans would have lost if there was a rigging going on in the election.
Rig it across the board if you're going to rig it, I would think. But that's all the time I have. You guys, thanks for chiming in on everything. I appreciate it very much. We're coming right back. We're going to talk to Nick Monticelli right after the break here on Flashpoint. Stay with us. Back here on Flashpoint with Nick Monticelli, host of Local 4 Live, every weekday from 8 to 10 a.m. And earlier this week, you were able to lead a fascinating discussion, I thought, with 4 superintendents from around Metro Detroit, including Dr. Nikolai Vitti of the biggest district in Michigan here in Detroit. What was your big takeaway?
Well, the big takeaway was that you normally don't see superintendents dive into politics much, right? I mean, they are right in the middle on everything. And even this, for the first time, R.J. Weber and Nikolai Vitti, all 4 of them did, but they really said, and I'm paraphrasing here, do your jobs. They're so frustrated with the legislature on not having a state budget.
People who don't understand the school budgets, too, even if they have a clear idea, or a general idea, I should say, they still have teachers that get pink slips every year if they have layoffs, and they got to know exactly how many to call back. And then we also have pre-K to talk about that is free, and also free school lunches, which now schools might have to subsidize the entire year if there's a shutdown.
Well, and you heard the Utica Community School Superintendent Bob and Rose say that he doesn't want to pull the rug out from families because there are some families who have come to rely on that. And even if you aren't relying on it, you set your household budgets to work on that point now. So how do you, at the beginning of the school year, say, oh, by the way, we're not providing your food anymore. You've got to figure that out.
Right. I do want to hear from those. We have soundbite just from some of that conversation. Take a listen.
It's really, to me, unconscionable that there's a statutory mandate for legislators by July 1st to have our budgets. They didn't. It's been a month and a half. That lack of self-accountability on their part, the 4 of us and the 3 of my colleagues are held accountable every day and every moment we want to be. However, if we were to miss a deadline or not do something that was required by law, we would have a consequence for that. I see no consequence. I see no urgency. And I'm going to be really blunt here. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Like, your policy decisions and what you do tells me everything I need to know about how you feel about the kids I serve. And I'm not feeling really great on either side of the aisle right now.
When you think about staffing and trying to hire, now teachers are hesitant to, if you have openings, they don't know if you're going to be able to offer a contract, so we may have talent that we can't bring. We want champions in front of our students. So that just really makes it difficult. Programs that we anticipate that we're going to have that we may pull back. It could impact class sizes. We heard about transportation and our ridership. School meals right now, we only have a guarantee that school meals will be available for all until September 30th. And so that would be a cost. We have to make a decision as a school district. Where do we go?
So let's dive into that then. I'm going to go around to everybody. How do you solve that issue? Do you subsidize the cost of free meals through the rest of the school year? Do you budget for that? Do you cross your fingers? Where are you at?
Well, I think it gets us into a place where we have to start thinking about that planning and transition for our families appropriately. I'm just not going to pull the rug out from underneath our families in routines for what they have expected the last several years. in this uncertainty for us in planning. And Nick, I think you hit it right on the head. It really pushes us back to be very conservative in every approach of our school district. Right now, we're looking at final kindergarten sections. We're very fortunate that we're seeing an increase in the number of kids coming into kindergarten in Utica schools, but are we going to place? Are we going to increase class sizes versus knowing exactly what those numbers are? We could,
Because you'd like to add a teacher.
we would love to add the teacher. And I know some people say, well, your district's so large, what is one teacher? But every one makes a huge difference.
And we are often told as superintendents, do your job. Right, we hear that from parents all the time,
Right.
And we often
Probably
hear
at every school board meeting, right?
And we often hear from the legislature, which is you have to be more fiscally conservative. You need to be more strategic with your budget. Why are we allocating these dollars when we don't see return on investment? We don't even have dollars. So everyone plays their role. Everyone has their responsibility, especially when you run for office. Do your job.
What you really took away from there is just, like you said, real talk from these superintendents.
And real frustration
Yeah.
too, right? I mean, and it was almost palpable. You could tell how angry they are trying to get things done.
It was great to be able to dive into that. And then, of course, you mentioned how you talked to State Superintendent Michael Rice the very next day. And the takeaway from there was you kind of already hinted at
Well,
it.
and like I said earlier, it was trying to understand why this is such a big deal. And we kind of look back on if, I don't know who uses a checkbook anymore, right? But if you're working on your checkbook, trying to understand what my budget's going to be. And he laid it out perfectly as to this is why we can't guess at this point because that range is so large.
Here's a little bit of what he had to say.
The holding up of the budget adversely affects students and staff because our school leaders become risk averse. And on the margins, they hold back on those last hirings to decide, to wait to see if they are able to afford them. And that doesn't benefit the school children.
Just a little taste of all of that, which is a big week. I mean, we talk about going back to school, and everybody sometimes thinks security, which is also a big topic.
Well, and also tied to the budget as well.
Right.
You know, RJ Weber from Northville said, my first question was, how do you build a school or work with your school so they're perfectly secure, or at least as much as you can be, while also making it not feel like a prison? And he stopped and he said, well, first of all, it'd be nice to know how much money I had to deal with so I could work on that issue.
Yep.
And then they started talking about it is a very, very fine balance in having a comfortable, warm, inviting space, because the studies now show that in the education realm, if the kid isn't comfortable, if they don't have the proper mental health care, if they don't feel like they're cared about, and if they feel like they're in a cinder block room with no walls that has no natural light, they're not going to learn.
It's tough.
It's different from when we went to school. You were shoved in the classroom, here's your brown desk and here's your textbooks.
Yeah.
Now they get couches.
Well, if you missed any of that, I highly encourage you to go find it. It's on Local 4 Plus, that discussion, well worth your time. And if anything, like you told me earlier this week, just to hear Nikolai Vitti thankful to be able to not have to talk in sound bites.
Right, yeah.
Which is good.
We'll go, that's the beauty of Local 4 Plus. We go as long as we want.
Every day, 8 to 10, Local 4 Live with Nick Monticelli. That's going to do it for us this Sunday. Hit us up with your emails at flashpoint@clickondetroit.com. We'll see you later.